Critical Role Recap Season 2, Episode 29. So last week's episode ended with the Mighty Nine making their way into the Iron Shepherd's fort, taking out one of the primary members and a few of their lackeys, and finally rescuing Neela's family. They went ahead and sent Neela and her family on their way, and then started to make their way deeper into the dungeons where the Iron Shepherds were holed up, at least two of the primary members were, and where there were more victims, more slaves being held in cages. And that was the end of last week's episode and where we picked up this week. This week's episode was their live performance episode that they did at Gen Con in front of a live audience. So there was lots of cheering and yelling and laughter. Sam Riegel took the opportunity of being on stage to show his true personality and dressed up in what I assume is his take on business casual. This episode had combat basically from start to finish, pretty much the whole way through. They were in various bouts of combat. As they made their way through the deeper section of the dungeons, they actually ended up running into Shikasta, who had been captured by the Iron Shepherds. They helped free him, and then he fought alongside them for the rest of the episode. So we had a surprise guest appearance of Kari Payton coming back to reprise his role as Shikasta, the cleric. As the Mighty Nine continued to fight their way through the dungeons and check out the cages to see if their friends were in them, they did eventually get trapped inside of a room when two of the lead members of the Iron Shepherds pulled a lever and trapped half of the group inside of a room. The other half was trapped outside of it. It didn't cause too many issues, though. There weren't any other traps in that room, so they didn't really... they trapped them in a room, but then they just kind of took a few shots at them. But every time the Iron Shepherds attempted to take shots at the Mighty Nine could just fire back. So it ended up being a pretty pointless... they just kind of slowed them down. The Iron Shepherds just kind of slowed down the Mighty Nine, but didn't really accomplish anything. It's not like they had some gas trap about to go off or some big fireballs set off in this room while they're all stuck there. They just kind of got stuck for a little bit and then eventually managed to open both of the gates that had closed down and continued on their way through. The Iron Shepherds again retreated farther into the dungeon and set up some traps behind themselves and locked a grate that they jumped down that led to the deepest section of the dungeon. As Caleb was about to investigate a strange looking bowl, Bo decided to run up and attempt to open the grate, and she was incinerated. Luckily, she didn't take all that much damage, but they did take a bit of unnecessary damage from a trap that Caleb was attempting to check out and then eventually disarm. Not discovered and successfully disarmed a trap on their way there, and then Caduceus just went ahead and used his Dispel Magic spell to get rid of the flame trap that was repeatedly going off and shooting blast cones of fire at them. Once they made it into the deepest section of the dungeon, they were finally able to have an actual bout of combat with the two remaining members of the Iron Shepherds. And this is also where Lorenzo finally showed himself. He had been kind of in their ears, nagging them and goading them onwards and talking about eating them throughout the entire night. And then he finally showed his true form. So Lorenzo's true form is that of an Oni, and he is a demon he's very big, he can fly and turn invisible, and he's got this giant glaive. The Mighty Nine end up fighting against the two remaining members of Iron Shepherds plus Lorenzo at the same time. They had Prado to deal with, who was the rogue, who mostly just shot his bow, and then Riza, who was a bard and was attempting to cast spells to disarm people and to try and bind them up. But for the most part, people won out wisdom saves and just managed to kind of take care of her pretty easily. For the most part, all of the combat went very smoothly for the Mighty Nine. They didn't run into too many issues until dealing with Lorenzo himself. Lorenzo was going back and forth between being invisible and wandering around and beating the crap out of people. And then he finally did get in position for a Cone of Cold, which I was expecting all night, obviously. He hit 4 people with the single Cone of Cold. It did 44 points of damage to 2 of them who failed their saving throws. And the 2 who failed those saving throws were Bo and Shikasta, both of which immediately went down. However, in that same round, Caduceus was able to come over and use Spare the Dying as a bonus action to prevent Shikasta from bleeding out, and then he used his Cure Wounds at level 2 on Bo, and apparently he has a feat where if he uses Cure Wounds on someone who's unconscious, it just goes ahead and restores the maximum amount of hit points that the spell can. So he instantly brought her back up to 21 health, which is really strong. Aside from that little hiccup with the Cone of Cold, the fight went really smoothly, and they actually managed to kill Lorenzo. Apparently Matt hadn't planned on them killing Lorenzo, but he made a mistake and forgot to put him flying up in the air again, and Bo did manage to land a stunning strike that allowed them to get a full round of attacks in, and they finished him off successfully. After killing Lorenzo, they investigated the chamber a bit more that they were in, and they did indeed find all of their lost members of the Mighty Nine. However, all 3 of them were unconscious, and obviously none of the players that play those characters were there at Gen Con, and so there was no actual interaction with Jester, Ford, or Yasha. However, all 3 of them are now safely back reunited with the Mighty Nine, and they have returned to town, and that's where the episode ended, with just the Mighty Nine on their way back to town, finally reunited with everyone. Shikasa took the prisoners that they had managed to save and escorted them to safety. It seems like Ashley Birch, and so therefore Keg, might be going her own way. I'm not sure yet if she's going to stick around for a little while or not, but they've kind of completed her arc, and now it's really more up to the inner workings of what's going on behind the scenes, whether or not Keg continues on with them or sets off on her own way. But yeah, that was pretty much it. There was a lot of combat. They did finally manage to take down Lorenzo and reunite their entire crew. There wasn't like obviously a scene of like reuniting and stuff like that because they were all unconscious and the players weren't there. I don't know what this means as far as what's like the near future of Critical Role, because I don't know if Travis and Laura or Ashley, I don't know if any of them are ready to actually come back yet from their personal lives stuff that's going on. So maybe they'll use the kidnapping and torture as a plot device, as a narrative device to keep those 3 kind of away for a while longer while they recover mentally and physically from the torture that they went through. I'm not really sure, but yeah, I guess we'll find out next week and in the weeks to come. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.